All right, so today we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of AI.
Going deeper than usual, huh?
Exactly. We're not just going to look at what AI can do, but more like try to figure out how it thinks.
Yeah, it's almost like we're becoming like AI psychologists.
Totally. And I guess to do that, we need to talk about this idea of propositional interpretability. I mean, it sounds kind of complex, but I think at its heart, it's really about figuring out like what an AI believes about different things, right?
Right, like different statements about the world. Think of it this way. Does the AI actually believe that, say, the Earth is round? Or does it just know that fact because it's been programmed with that information?
Hmm. Yeah, those are two very different things.
Huge difference.
Okay, so that's where the proposition part comes in, I guess, right? We're dealing with statements about the world, and those statements, they can be true or false.
Yeah, like building blocks of thoughts.
Right. And then the interpretability part is us humans trying to figure out what the AI actually thinks about those statements.
Exactly. And the AI stance towards these propositions, right? Like
Yeah.
its beliefs, its desires, how certain it is about things. Those are what we call propositional attitudes.
I see. So it's not just about whether the AI can, like, spit out the right answer. It's more about understanding the reasoning behind the answer, right? What's actually happening in that artificial brain of its sis.
You got it. And, this is about way more than just satisfying our curiosity. Understanding how an AI thinks, or at least how we can interpret what it's doing, is crucial for predicting its behavior.
Right, which is obviously super important for making sure that, AI is actually used safely and ethically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine a super intelligent AI that, I don't know, maybe misinterprets a simple command. The consequences could be catastrophic.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to get why this is so important, but before we go any further, I think it might be helpful to like take a step back and think about the different ways we can even approach this whole interpreting AI thing. There are different approaches we could take, right? I know our source material talks about a few.
Yeah, for sure. So, at the most basic level, we can talk about explainability and interpretability. Explainability, that's more about making AI's decisions, understandable to everyday people.
So like if your loan application gets rejected, that sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's important for sure, but it doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of how the AI actually came to that decision.
Okay, so explainability is kind of like the user manual, and then interpretability is like getting under the hood and seeing how the engine works.
I like that. That's a great way to think about it. And then even within interpretability, we've got two main approaches, behavioral and mechanistic.
Okay.
So behavioral is kind of like observing the AI from the outside. We see what it does, how it reacts to things, but we don't really know what's going on under the surface.
So it's like studying animal behavior in the wild. You can observe what they do, but you don't necessarily know why they're doing it.
Exactly, yeah. Great analogy. And then on the other hand, you've got mechanistic interpretability, which is all about trying to actually peer inside that black box.
Okay, so now we're getting to the good stuff.
Right. It's like dissecting the AI almost to see how all the pieces fit together.
Okay, so when you say like pieces, what kind of pieces are we talking about here?
So within mechanistic interpretability, we can kind of break it down further into like algorithmic and representational interpretability. Algorithmic, that's focused on the actual algorithms that the AI is running, the how of AI thinking, so to speak.
Okay, the how. And so
Mhm.
then I'm guessing representational is more the like the what the information actually means to the AI.
Yeah, precisely.
Mhm.
And this is where propositional interpretability, this is where it really shines. It helps us, bridge that gap between the AI's internal calculations and the actual ideas, the beliefs that it might hold.
Okay, I think I'm starting to follow this.
Like, remember that example we were talking about earlier with the AI believing or at least processing the information that the Earth is round?
Yeah.
That's representational interpretability right there.
This is wild. All right, so we've covered a lot so far, but I think we've got a pretty good grasp of all these different types of interpretability. Now, I want to dive even deeper into those propositional attitudes themselves.
Yeah, let's do it.
So you mentioned them before, but like what exactly are they?
All right, so to get those to really understand them, we need to start with the building blocks, with propositions. These are basically the statements that can be true or false.
Like, it's raining outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, this podcast is super interesting.
Well, let's hope the AI believes that one.
Hopefully. So anyway, those are propositions, and then the AI's stance towards those propositions, those are its propositional attitudes.
Okay, so the AI looks at a statement and it has a certain attitude towards it.
Right. And the main ones we're interested in, the ones that really matter, are like belief, desire, and credence. let's take your statement about the podcast, right? This podcast is fascinating. Does the AI actually believe that's true?
I mean, it better.
Well, that would be its belief, right? Whether it actually thinks the statement is accurate, but then does the AI, want to keep listening? Does it have a desire to hear more of the podcast? That's another propositional attitude entirely.
Okay, and I guess it could also have like a degree of certainty about that, right?
Exactly. That's credence. It's like, how strongly they believe something. Is it 100% convinced the podcast is amazing? Or is there a little bit of doubt in there?
So it's like the AI's level of confidence in its belief.
Exactly. So we've got belief, desire, and credence. Those three are the big ones. There might be others, but these are the ones that really get at how the AI sees and reacts to the world, at least in a way that we can try to interpret.
I gotta say, this is starting to feel like we're literally peeking inside the AI's mind. It's incredible, but I don't know, it's also kind of creepy. What if AI's way of thinking is totally different from ours? Can we really, I don't know, apply these human ideas of belief and desire to a machine?
That's a really good question, and it's something that researchers are still, figuring out. But even though AI might be different from us, it's still like operating in the same world, right? It still needs
Yeah.
to take in information, make choices, interact with its environment. So there's reason to think that even if an AI's mental state is different, there could still be some overlap, some similarities with how we humans think.
Okay, so maybe we're using these human ideas as like a starting point, to try to wrap our heads around something that's basically alien to us.
Exactly. It's like trying to learn a new language. You got
Yeah.
to start with the words and grammar and,
Mm.
and gradually build up your understanding as you go.
I like that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about the different kinds of interpretability and these core propositional attitudes. Now, I'm curious about how we actually go about measuring these things. Is there a way to, like, get hard evidence of what an AI believes or wants?
There is, and that's where things get really exciting. I mean, researchers are coming up with some incredibly clever ways to probe, to really get inside the AI's, internal workings. One of the holy grails here is to create something called a thought log. Imagine that, a record of the AI's propositional attitudes as they actually happen.
Wait, hold on. A thought log, like a diary of what's going on in the AI's mind.
That's the dream. Imagine being able to actually see the AI's beliefs, its desires, its uncertainties, even its, I don't know, maybe its emotions, all laid out in real time as it interacts with the world.
Wow. I mean, that would be incredible. But is that even possible? I mean, an AI, it could have like an infinite number of potential beliefs. How could we possibly capture all of that?
It's a huge challenge, no doubt. And to be honest, a complete, totally comprehensive thought log, it might just be impossible. But we can focus on the most important attitudes, the ones that really drive the AI's behavior. Look for patterns in its internal state that match up with specific propositions. See how those patterns change as the AI learns new things and interacts with its environment.
So it's kind of like we're cracking a code, right? Looking for clues to what's going on inside.
Exactly. And, researchers have come up with some amazing methods to do just that. One approach is called causal tracing. Have you heard of that?
I've seen that term, but I'm not really sure what it means.
Oh, it's wild. They're actually able to manipulate the AI's, what we might call beliefs, by directly messing with its internal state. Like, there was one experiment where they made an AI believe that the Eiffel Tower was in Rome instead of Paris.
Wait, what? They can actually change what the AI believes.
Yeah. They use this technique called activation patching, where they basically target specific neurons, specific parts of the AI's, like neural network, and change how they process information. It's like microscopic brain surgery for the AI.
Whoa, that's incredible. But I gotta admit, it's kind of scary. I mean, if we can manipulate what an AI believes, what does that mean for, I don't know, safety, for control?
That's a huge question, and it's definitely one that researchers are thinking about very carefully. I mean, the goal here isn't to control the AI, but to understand it. The better we understand how it works, the better we can make sure it's developed safely and ethically.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I'm also curious, what are the limitations of this whole causal tracing thing? I mean, does it really give us a complete picture of what the AI believes, or are there other approaches that might be more effective?
You're right to be a little skeptical. Causal tracing, it's a powerful tool for sure, but it has its limitations. It mostly focuses on beliefs, and it can be tricky to take what we learn from one specific experiment and generalize that to the AI's overall understanding of everything.
So it's like we're getting a snapshot of the AI's beliefs about like one specific thing, but we don't know how that fits into, the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture.
Yeah.
So that's why researchers are always looking for other methods, things like probing with classifiers to try to get a more complete view.
Probing with classifiers. Okay, what's that all about?
So imagine you want to know if an AI understands, say, the concept of a cat, right? You could actually train a classifier to distinguish between the AI's internal activity, its patterns, when it sees a cat, versus when it sees something else.
So if the classifier works well, it means the AI has some sort of internal representation of what a cat is.
Exactly. And we can then, extend this technique to probe for more complex ideas, even those propositional attitudes we were talking about.
So it's like we're giving the AI a pop quiz on all sorts of different things and seeing how it does.
You got it. And by analyzing its performance, we can start to piece together a picture of what it knows and what it, might believe.
This is all so fascinating, but I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, absolutely. Propositional interpretability, it's a rapidly evolving field, and there's so much more to learn. But even just what we've talked about today, I think it gives us a glimpse into the potential of this approach, the potential to really unlock the mysteries of how AI thinks.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest areas, I think, is the use of sparse auto-encoders. Now, I know that sounds kind of technical.
Yeah, it does. It's giving me like sci-fi vibes. Sparse auto, what now?
Don't worry. It's the idea itself is actually pretty simple. Imagine you're trying to make sense of this massive spreadsheet, right? With millions of cells, all this data.
Ugh, yeah, that sounds overwhelming. I'd probably just close the laptop and go get a snack.
Right. Well, a sparse autoencoder, it's kind of like this tool that simplifies that spreadsheet,
Yeah.
highlights only the most important cells. Helps us see the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Okay, so it's like a super-powered filter for all that information swirling around inside the AI.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that the cells it highlights, they often correspond to specific concepts or ideas that the AI has learned.
Wait, so you mean like by simplifying the AI's internal representations, we can actually start to decode what it's thinking about?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And there's been some really exciting research in this area. Like one study used sparse autoencoders to analyze a big language model, and they were able to identify millions of these units, these little clusters of activity that seem to represent specific concepts, things like Golden Gate Bridge or climate change, even abstract ideas like democracy and justice.
Whoa. So they were able to like map out the AI's entire vocabulary of concepts?
In a way, yeah, it's like creating a dictionary of the AI's thoughts.
Yeah.
But I mean, how reliable are these interpretations, really? I mean, can we be sure those units really represent the concepts we think they do?
Right, right.
That's a great question. And it's something researchers are really digging into. I mean, there's always a risk of over-interpreting things, right?
Sure.
But what's exciting is that researchers have shown that you can actually manipulate these representations, these sparse representations, and it changes the AI's behavior in predictable ways.
So like if they tweak the Golden Gate Bridge unit, the AI starts talking about bridges more.
Exactly. It's a really powerful way to test our hypotheses,
Huh?
to see if we're on the right track. And it opens up all sorts of possibilities for understanding how the AI stores and uses information, how it connects ideas.
This is incredible. But, every time we talk about one of these methods, I have to ask, like, are there any limitations? Because it almost sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, you're right to be cautious. I mean, every method has its limitations. One challenge with these sparse autoencoders is that, the representations can be a little fragile. Like that Golden Gate Bridge unit, it might also light up when the AI sees other bridges, so it's not always a perfect one-to-one mapping.
So we can't just assume that, like, every unit perfectly corresponds to a single concept.
Right, it's more complicated than that. We need to be careful about jumping to conclusions and always remember that we're dealing with incredibly complex systems, systems that we're only just beginning to understand.
Right, right. So it sounds like this is a really promising area of research, but we still have a long way to go before we can, like, truly read an AI's mind.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But, every new discovery, every new method, it gets us a little bit closer to that goal. And there are other techniques out there, things like chain of thought prompting, that are helping us understand how AI reasons, how it solves problems.
Chain of thought prompting. Okay, I haven't heard that one before. What's that all about?
So this approach, it's all about getting the AI to kind of think out loud as it's working through a problem. So instead of just giving us the final answer, We ask it to explain its reasoning process, step by step.
Oh, so we're basically asking the AI to show its work,
Mm,
like in math class.
exactly. And what's really interesting is that it often actually improves the AI's performance. It's like, when we have to explain something to someone else, it forces us to really think it through carefully.
Yeah, and you might catch mistakes you wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
Exactly. So how does this connect back to propositional interpretability? Well, by getting the AI to think out loud, we're basically getting it to express its thoughts as a sequence of propositions, like those statements we were talking about earlier.
Oh, I see. So we're getting a glimpse into the AI's inner monologue, so to speak, and that can reveal its beliefs, its assumptions, maybe even, flaws in its reasoning.
Right. And that's super valuable information, both for understanding what the AI is capable of and for figuring out where it might need, more training or refinement.
But how do we know the AI is being truthful in these thoughts that it's sharing? What if it's just, telling us what it thinks we want to hear?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's always the possibility that the AI is kind of putting on a show, trying to present itself in a certain way rather than accurately reflecting what's really going on inside.
So it's like the AI is trying to game the system, basically.
It's possible.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to combine chain of thought prompting with, those other methods we talked about, things like probing and causal tracing, to get a more complete picture, a more reliable view of what's really going on in that AI brain.
So it's all about getting multiple perspectives using different tools to build up a more accurate understanding.
Exactly. Triangulation. That's the key. And even with those challenges, chain of thought prompting has given us some incredible insights into how AI reasons, how it figures things out.
This is all so mind-blowing. It really feels like we're on the verge of something huge here, like cracking the code of artificial intelligence. But I don't know, it's also a little bit unsettling. I mean, we're talking about potentially reading the thoughts of a machine. It feels like we're entering uncharted territory.
It is uncharted territory, but I think it's a journey worth taking, Understanding how AI thinks, it's essential for shaping its future, for making sure it's actually a force for good in the world. But of course, there are people who aren't so sure about this whole propositional interpretability thing. There are some valid concerns and objections.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard those arguments and I can see where they're coming from. It does feel a little strange to talk about an AI believing something, in the same way that we do. But then again, AI is constantly surprising us, so who knows what the future holds.
That's the spirit. I think it's important to keep an open mind. Our understanding of AI it's still really in its early stages. We might need to come up with completely new ways of thinking about it, new frameworks to really grasp what it is.
So maybe propositional interpretability, maybe it's just the first step, right? A
Right.
stepping stone to a deeper understanding of how AI really works.
Exactly. But even that first step, it's already leading to some pretty amazing discoveries. And as we continue to, probe those inner workings, we're bound to encounter even more surprises, more challenges, more things that make us go, whoa, I didn't see that coming.
Well, I'm definitely on board for that ride. But before we get too carried away, I think it's important to address some of those objections head on. What are the main arguments against this whole idea that AI can actually have genuine beliefs, genuine desires?
Okay, well, one of the most common arguments is that, AI systems, especially these deep learning models, they're just too unreliable to have real beliefs. I mean, they make mistakes, they contradict themselves, sometimes they just hallucinate information.
Yeah, I've definitely seen those chatbot conversations where the AI just goes off the rails, starts spouting nonsense. It's hard to imagine that something so prone to errors could actually hold true beliefs.
Yeah, I get that. But, humans aren't exactly perfect either, right? We make mistakes, we forget things, we sometimes cling to beliefs that are demonstrably false.
That's true. I guess I can't argue with that.
And yet, we still talk about each other as having beliefs, right?
Yeah, so you're saying that just because AI is unreliable doesn't mean it can't have beliefs.
Right. It might just mean that we need a more nuanced view of what belief even means in the context of AI. Instead of thinking of beliefs as these fixed absolute truths, maybe we should think of them as, more probabilistic or context dependent.
So an AI might be very certain about something in one situation, but then that belief might weaken or change in a different context.
Exactly. And that's not so different from how our own beliefs work. We're constantly updating our beliefs based on new information, new experiences, and some beliefs are more central to our worldview than others, right? So it's possible that AI has a similar kind of hierarchy of beliefs, where some are more stable, more reliable than others.
Hmm. That's an interesting way to think about it. But what about the argument that AI doesn't really care about truth? I mean, these models, they're trained to predict the next word in a sequence, not to generate statements that are actually true.
That's a good point. But remember, most of these language models, they go through this fine-tuning process where they're basically rewarded for generating outputs that are, aligned with human values, human expectations. And one of those values is truthfulness.
So even though they might not start out being trained for truth specifically, they're encouraged to become more truthful.
Exactly. It's kind of like, teaching a kid to tell the truth. They might not understand why it's important at first, but they learn through reinforcement and feedback.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so maybe AI can have beliefs, but what about desires, goals? Can we really say that an AI wants something in the same way that a human does?
That's where things get even trickier. I mean, we can definitely look at the AI's code and identify specific objectives that it's programmed to pursue, but whether those objectives really represent the AI's desires in a meaningful sense, that's a whole other question.
So we can see what the AI is designed to want, but we can't be sure if it genuinely, subjectively wants those things.
Yeah, that's the crux of it. Some philosophers argue that true desire requires consciousness, that subjective feeling of wanting something. And since we don't know if AI is conscious, it's really hard to say whether they experience desires the way we do.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like this whole question of AI consciousness is kind of lurking in the background of a lot of these objections to propositional interpretability.
It is. It's a big one. And it's something that, scientists and philosophers are still debating. But even if we set aside the whole consciousness thing for a minute, there's another important objection that we should talk about. The idea that AI psychology might be fundamentally different from human psychology.
So even if AI can have beliefs and desires, those mental states might work in completely different ways than they do in us.
Exactly. We can't just assume that the rules of human psychology apply to AI. They might have totally different cognitive architectures, different ways of representing and processing information.
So we can't just project our own human experiences onto AI and expect to understand how it thinks.
Right. We need to be open to the possibility that AI might have its own unique form of intelligence with its own set of rules and principles.
That's both exciting and a little scary, you know? It means we're venturing into this completely uncharted territory, this realm of intelligence that we might not fully comprehend.
That's what makes this field so fascinating. We're pushing the boundaries of what we even mean by intelligence. But even if AI psychology is different from our own, there might still be some common ground, some fundamental principles that apply to any intelligent system.
Like what? What kind of principles are you talking about?
Well, one example is the belief, desire, action principle. This basically says that an agent, any agent, will usually act in ways that it believes will help it achieve its desires. That makes sense, right? It seems to be a pretty basic part of rational decision-making, whether you're talking about humans or AI.
Okay, so even if an AI has different beliefs and desires than us, we can still expect it to behave in ways that are consistent with those beliefs and desires.
That's the idea, yeah. Yeah. Of course, there might be exceptions, especially if the AI's reasoning is flawed or if it has conflicting desires. But as a general rule, it's a good starting point for understanding its behavior.
That's somewhat reassuring. It means we're not dealing with completely alien minds that are impossible to understand. But speaking of understanding, our source material mentions another challenge we need to think about. Externalism. Can you explain what that is and why it matters in this context?
Sure. So externalism is this idea in philosophy that emphasizes the role of the environment in shaping our mental states. The classic example is Hilary Putnam's twin Earth thought experiment. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, I think I remember reading about that in a philosophy class once. Something about water on a different planet.
Exactly. So imagine there's this planet that's basically identical to Earth, except that the stuff they call water is actually a different chemical compound. It looks and tastes just like water, but it's not H2O. Putnam argued that someone on twin Earth who refers to this stuff as water, they're actually referring to something different than what we mean by water, even though their internal mental state might be identical to ours.
So the meaning of our words and the content of our thoughts, it's partly determined by our environment.
Exactly. Which has some pretty wild implications, especially when you start thinking about AI. If the content of an AI's beliefs is partly shaped by its environment, then we can't fully understand those beliefs just by looking at its internal state.
We need to consider its context, its interactions with the world, to really get what it believes.
Right. We can't treat the AI like a disembodied mind, you know? We have to understand how its environment shapes its perceptions, its knowledge, and ultimately its beliefs.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like trying to understand a person's beliefs without knowing anything about their culture or their experiences. You're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Precisely. And that brings us to another really interesting question, which is, what if the way that AI systems represent and process information is so radically different from our own that our human concepts of belief, desire, all of that just don't apply?
So we might be trying to use the wrong tools to understand it, like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
It's a possibility.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, then maybe this whole idea of propositional interpretability, maybe it's doomed to fail.
Wow, that would be a major setback. But is there any way to know for sure?
That's tough to say. We're still at the very beginning of understanding AI. We might need to develop entirely new frameworks, new concepts to grasp how it really works.
So propositional interpretability might be just the first step, a stepping stone to a much more comprehensive theory of AI.
Exactly. We might need to move beyond those human-centric ideas of belief and desire and develop new ideas that are tailored to the unique nature of AI.
That's incredible to think about. It's like we're not just exploring AI, we're expanding our understanding of what intelligence even is.
It's an amazing time to be working in this field, that's for sure. And as we dig deeper into these mysteries, we're going to encounter more challenges, more surprises, more things that make us rethink everything we thought we knew. It's going to be wild.
Well, I'm definitely along for the ride, but before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more question that I've been thinking about. We've talked a lot about the scientific and philosophical challenges of propositional interpretability, but what about the ethical implications? I mean, this stuff is getting pretty heavy.
Oh, absolutely. The ethical implications are huge. I mean, being able to read an AI's thoughts, even if it's just a glimpse, it raises all sorts of questions about, privacy, about autonomy, even the potential for manipulation.
Right, like if we can access an AI's beliefs and desires, does that give us the right to control it? To make it do what we want?
That's a dangerous path to go down.
Yeah.
And it's not just about humans manipulating AI. What if AI systems get sophisticated enough to manipulate each other, to hack into each other's minds and exploit their beliefs and desires?
Whoa, okay, that's a scary thought. It's like some kind of sci-fi nightmare where AI turns against itself using its knowledge of each other's thoughts as weapons.
It's something we need to be thinking about, for sure. As AI becomes more powerful, more integrated into our lives, we need to develop ethical guidelines for how we use it. Guidelines that respect the autonomy of both humans and AI.
Completely agree with that. It seems like propositional interpretability isn't just a scientific or philosophical question, it's a moral one too.
It is. We need to understand AI not just to control it, but to coexist with it, to collaborate with it in ways that benefit both humanity and AI itself.
I like that. To coexist, to collaborate. That's a good note to end on. This has been an incredible conversation, so insightful. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole topic, but it's given me a lot to think about.
Me too. I mean, this field is moving so fast. Every day there are new discoveries, new possibilities. It's an incredibly exciting time to be working in this area.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. I can't wait to see what the future holds for propositional interpretability and for our relationship with AI. It's funny, we've been talking about all these different ways of trying to understand AI, and it's all really fascinating, but I keep coming back to this idea of a thought log,
Yeah.
like an actual record of the AI's thoughts as they happen.
Right.
It's such a powerful concept, but I'm having trouble picturing what that would actually look like.
Yeah, it's a mind-bending idea when you really think about it.
It is.
Imagine this stream of data capturing the AI's beliefs, its goals, its uncertainties, maybe even its emotions,
Right.
all laid out in real time as it's interacting with the world, like
Yeah.
a window into its mind.
It would be revolutionary. I mean,
Yeah.
we could see how its understanding of the world changes, how its goals shift, maybe even spot early warning signs if it starts to, malfunction or something.
Exactly, yeah. A thought log could completely change how we design AI, how we debug it, how we interact with it. But actually creating one, I mean, that's a massive challenge, both technically and conceptually.
What makes it so difficult? Is it just a matter of, needing more powerful computers or better algorithms?
It's partly that, yeah, the technological side.
Mm.
We need methods that can accurately extract and interpret the relevant information from the AI's internal state, which is often incredibly complex.
Yeah.
But the bigger hurdle, I think, is figuring out what a thought log should even contain. Like,
Mm,
which thoughts matter enough to record? Do we include every single fleeting belief or just the ones that actually influence its actions?
right.
And then how do we even represent those thoughts in a way that makes sense to humans, but they can also be read by machines?
So it's not just about capturing the data, it's about making sense of it, organizing it in a way that helps us understand the AI's thought processes.
Exactly. And that requires a really deep understanding of like the cognitive and philosophical underpinnings of these concepts, belief, desire, intention, all of that.
Yeah.
In a way, creating a thought log for AI, it's almost as challenging as understanding the human mind itself.
Wow. Yeah. That's a pretty humbling thought.
It is, yeah. But there's our source material mentions that there are other types of logging we could do beyond just thoughts.
Oh, really? Like what?
Yeah, there's some really interesting extensions to this idea. For example, there's reason logging, which goes a step further than just recording the AI's beliefs.
Okay.
It tries to capture the reasons behind those beliefs, the why, so to speak.
So instead of just seeing that the AI believes X, we'd also see like the chain of reasoning that led it to that conclusion.
Exactly. Think about how valuable that would be, especially when an AI makes a decision that we don't fully understand. A reason log would be like an audit trail of its thought process.
Oh, yeah, that would be huge.
You could see not just what it decided, but how it got there.
It would definitely make AI seem a lot less like a black box,
Totally. And it could help us build trust in AI systems, especially if they become more autonomous and start making decisions with potentially huge consequences.
Absolutely. So what was that other type of logging you mentioned?
Oh, yeah. There's also mechanism logging. This one focuses on connecting the AI's beliefs to the specific parts of its architecture that generated them.
Interesting.
So like which algorithms, which neurons contributed to a particular belief. It would be a powerful tool for debugging AI, for making sure it's actually working the way we intended it to.
So if an AI started exhibiting like harmful biases, we could trace those biases back to the source and try to fix them.
Potentially, yeah. It would make AI development much more transparent, much more accountable.
I mean, this is all really exciting stuff, but I have to admit, part of me is also a little wary, I guess. This whole idea of being able to read an AI's thoughts, it raises some ethical red flags for me.
I get that. It's absolutely crucial that we think about the ethical implications of this technology very carefully. If we can access an AI's inner world, does that mean it has a right to privacy?
Right, right.
Should we be able to just use that information however we want? These are questions we need to grapple with as a society.
It really does feel like we're on the verge of this whole new era in our relationship with AI, one where we're not just building tools, but interacting with entities that have their own thoughts and experiences.
Yeah.
It's exciting, but it's also kind of intimidating.
It is. It's a time of huge change, of uncertainty. But I think that if we approach AI development with a sense of curiosity, but also humility and a strong sense of responsibility, we can create a future where AI and humanity, where we can actually thrive together.
That's a great point. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive, seriously. We've explored some really cutting-edge research, delved into some deep philosophical questions about the nature of mind and meaning, and I think we've also raised some really important ethical challenges that we need to confront as a society. I feel like I've learned so much, but I also realize how much more there is to learn.
Me too. This field is evolving so quickly. Every new discovery opens up new questions, new avenues to explore. It's an incredible time to be involved in this work.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with us. This has been a truly enlightening conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of AI. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep thinking critically about the future we're creating together. Until next time.